at Baylor University. Thanks indeed for joining us once again on BBC News. We've spoken for over a year now about the efforts at avoiding a regional all-out conflict. What we've seen in Lebanon for the last month or so, and we're awaiting obviously the Israeli retaliation for the Iranian attack. Are hopes of an all-out war now past?
I think that the situation becomes more difficult every day that goes on, not just because the chance of a negotiated solution seem to be receding even as we speak, but also because the dynamics within each of the parties are changing. You don't get to go back to the day before it started in Gaza or in Lebanon or, frankly, in Jordan. Things have fundamentally changed. So whether or not we're talking about a massive regional war in a military sense, I think that we've got a return to a highly unstable regional dynamic among all of the countries involved that we haven't seen in a very long time.
And on that note, what do you think is the calculation for Israel at this point? Obviously, it's got that invasion in Lebanon, in Gaza, and it's considering what to do regarding Iran.
I'm sure if someone were going to take a purely geostrategic point of view and look at the dynamics among states, they would come up with something related to national security. I'm going to take it a different direction. We have to remember that all of these things involve decisions made by individual people. The decisions being made by Prime Minister Netanyahu are not only based on some sort of security calculation, but also on his own domestic political calculations and, frankly, on what he assesses to be happening in the presidential election campaign in the United States. It makes it doubly complicated because each part of this is unstable in and of itself. In terms of what Israelis hope will happen, I think, unfortunately, there is such a strong view that the hostility to Israel is being somehow caused by Iran, and that therefore an attack on Iran or something that is going to reduce Iran's efficacy will necessarily change the dynamics in the region. Obviously, Iran is putting lots of money, lots of weapons, lots of training, not being helpful at all. However, the reasons that groups are frustrated themselves is not because Iran started it. So we don't get to have things go back to puppies and butterflies simply because Iran is damaged.
You mentioned the impending US election. We're just over 2 weeks away now. In terms of when you mentioned it in relation to Prime Minister Netanyahu, do you think he's inclined to kind of tread water until the result of that is clear?
If I were going to offer my own estimation, I think that he has long since thrown in with former President Trump and is hoping that Trump is successful and is, frankly, using political connections to that end. If you look at some of the reactions from Trump's people to the leaking of documents in the last 24 hours, you'll see that it is very much being played for partisan gain.
Now, we have seen the US reposition its troops in the general area. We've also, of course, seen the US send this anti-missile defence system to Israel and the expert troops that are required to operate it. What message does that send to the region in terms of where the US is or where the thinking is about what happens next?
I think that the positioning and staffing of that system is meant to prevent there being the kind of attack on Iran that would make it seem essential for the United States itself to respond. I think the United States is trying to avoid a situation where the damage to Israel is such that there would be a strong pressure within the United States to take direct action. The United States being involved in a regional war in the Middle East, some would say, again, is not going to be particularly useful for the United States, either domestically or in its relations with allies. So I think that this is an attempt to prevent that from happening. Of course, the other side is that with U.S. troops on the ground there, were something to happen from Iran that actually causes U.S. casualties, we've got an entirely different situation.
All right, Joanne Cummings, thanks indeed for joining us once again on BBC News.
My pleasure.